Hi everyone. So continuing in my series of Think Outside the Back, we're continuing with the poster here. So this week we're going to talk about this connection here from the spinal cord. So once again, as the poster says, subluxation or a misalignment or a lack of movement in the spine, that can actually cause stress within the nervous system. So if there's a subluxation in this area here, it can have a negative effect on a part of our brain called the cerebellum. Cerebellum is an older part of our brain. It's kind of a small thing in the back here. It's very, very dense. It's really packed with lots and lots of neurons. But the biggest thing that the cerebellum does is actually it helps our balance and our coordination. So if somebody has a subluxation in the spine, that can actually go up here and have lack of input or negative input into the cerebellum, and that can actually cause balance problems. So some of the ramifications of having spinal misalignments or subluxations just on this part of your brain, the cerebellum, that can cause problems with people's posture. It can cause problems with people's balance and their coordination. Because sometimes our spine should actually have three good curves in it like this, and the neck should have a good curve. When people start to lose their cerebellum, they lose the sense of where their body is, and sometimes what happens is their spine becomes like a military spine, and it becomes very, very straight, like even in the upper back area. Instead of having a nice curve in there like that, it looks like a military spine almost. And all these, we call them the intrinsic muscles within the spine, kind of lose their normal tension, and the spine actually loses its stability, which would have with the normal curves. So the other things happens is balance and coordination. So as people are getting older very often, lack of movement is a very, very drastic thing that has a negative impact on their balance and their coordination. So when we have a positive influence into the spine, we put movement into the spine into the right place, or we allow the spine to move properly through our entrainments or through our adjustments in chiropractic. It has a positive influence on this area 7 into the spine, and that feeds up into the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is actually stimulated and kept healthy by normal spinal movement. And especially the first couple of vertebrae in the spine are the biggest things that keep that healthy. So a lot of times children in the autism spectrum or with ADHD and stuff like that, some of them have a lot of coordination and balance problems, and they're very, very clumsy kids. And if they've had a really stressful traumatic birth, that if those first two vertebrae are really, really locked out and not moving very well, it can have a big, massive bad influence on that cerebellum. And that cerebellum actually goes into the brain, and it feeds a lot of other parts of the brain with stimulation. So if it's not getting stimulated, there's a lot of things in the brain that aren't getting stimulated, like particularly we call it the prefrontal cortex of the right side of the brain. That has a big influence on helping children develop social, we call them the social norms, or how to behave in public sort of thing. So when the cerebellum is weak, if it's not stimulating that part of the brain properly, that's when we have kids in the autism spectrum that are, quote unquote, not behaving properly in public, maybe yelling, screaming, doing things, picking their nose, or, doing whatever that's just sort of, quote unquote, not socially acceptable, because the cerebellum from the birth process was never stimulated properly in those first few months or years of life, and that never got good stimulation up to the prefrontal cortex to develop that sort of social integration, being able to understand body language, read faces, understand puns and things like that. So often kids with Asperger's, the same kind of thing is happening there on a lighter degree. So the other big thing, there's a coordination issue too. So what the cerebellum does, it kind of refines your movements as you're getting closer to a target. So sometimes the testing in my office, I'll get people with your eyes closed, try to touch the tip of your nose, and sometimes people will start doing this. And if I see them start to do this as they're getting close to the target, I know their cerebellum is pretty weak. If I get them to close their eyes with their feet close together, they might fall over to the side of the weak cerebellum. So if the brain, it's always feeling that happening, so it actually might cause a lot of contraction on the opposite side of their body. And these people might be coming in with a whole pile of neck pain or all this constant pain that they've been getting worked on for years from muscle workers and things like that, and it's never quote unquote going away. If we never balance the weakness in the cerebellum on one side, that's always going to be a chronic issue. So what we do in a chiropractic, we put positive influence into the spine. That'll have positive influence in I'm just talking about one part of the brain right now, and there's so many other big influences. But if you know anybody who has coordination issues, postural problems, balance issues, tripping all the time, running into things, clumsy, if you know children in the autism spectrum disorders, kids that are kind of clumsy or kind of floppy kids, those kind of things, we call them the drunken bulls. those are the kind of people we need to help. So if you know anybody like that, please send them this video. Below this video you'll see the links for our office, so you can get connected with us so we can give you some help. So that's the health tip for this week. Thank you.